del inicio de una nueva época en América Latina y en el Caribe.
Apostando por una transformación profunda que empezaron en Cuba, Venezuela, ahora en toda Latinoamérica.
Bolívar desde algún lugar del infinito nos está mirando lleno de orgullo. Su sueño se está haciendo realidad.
Esta revolución es un símbolo de victoria, de lucha, de honor, de sacrificio, y tenemos que defenderla.
Y ahora el pueblo que se alza en la lucha con voz de gigante gritando adelante. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será...
Han resistido 20 palos de agua y aquí está el pueblo.
Y la revolución bolivariana, que hoy cumple 10 años, cumplirá también 50 años, porque será el mandato de ustedes.
El mar de pueblo no ha hecho sino crecer.
Es irreversible. Nuestros pueblos han despertado y no darán marcha jamás para atrás.
América Latina hoy se ha liberado del yugo imperialista.
Ilumina el futuro de los pobres, el futuro de la humanidad.
La patria o es una sola y grande o no es.
¡Alerta! ¡Alerta! ¡Alerta que camina! ¡La espada por América!
La conciencia del pueblo, la voluntad del pueblo es lo más sagrado de esta revolución.
Nunca dejen de luchar, nunca se venzan, que en ustedes esté el espíritu y la fuerza, no solo de Venezuela, sino de Latinoamérica.
Ustedes son el huracán bolivariano.
Esta es una revolución que ni se vende, ni se rinde, jamás.
Al pueblo, lo que es del pueblo. El pueblo, una vez más, tiene razón. Y que viva Simón Bolívar.
¡Patria muerte!
¡Venceremos! Gracias, hermana. Gracias, hermana.
What's good, everybody? Viva Chavez, viva Venezuela, viva Nicaragua, viva Cuba, viva todos los países socialistas de América Latina. My name is Ramiro. I'm the co-editor of ANTICONQUISTA. ANTICONQUISTA is an anti-imperialist media collective. Our content is produced by and for the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. And today we're talking about socialism in Latin America, a view from the diaspora, with our homies, our comrades from the Troika Collective, Ride or Die. That's one of our favorite groups out there, holding it down in Miami, of Latinos, Caribeños, resisting capitalism, imperialism in the belly of the Gusano beast. Shout out to everybody in the chat. First and foremost, I want to say we also have to pay our respects to Comandante Hugo Chavez, who passed away on this day in 2013, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was a very sad day for me. I remember I was at work. I found out that he passed away. I saw Maduro giving the speech talking about how Chavez passed away. And it's something that in all of our hearts is deep down, we felt it. We were severely impacted by it. But like Chavez said in the intro, in the video, we have to keep fighting. We have to keep unifying our people, keep building, and not let the empire get us down. And so I'm really excited to be talking with all the comrades on here today with Troika Collective and ANTICONQUISTA. So let's just go around and introduce the comrades. So we got Comrade Nick Ayala, co-editor of ANTICONQUISTA out in Newark, New Jersey. How's it going, Nick?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm just remembering Hugo Chavez. I was listening to some of his speeches today, some of his moments, and was just remembering how great of a person he was. And he was one of the people who inspired me to get into leftism, socialism, but especially Latin American socialism, which we're going to be talking about today. And I'm just really excited to be part of this. We also got Comrade Khalil with the Troika Collective out in Miami. How's it going, Comrade Khalil?
What it is. Super excited to be here. Y'all have been putting in hella work, not only for the diaspora, but for socialism in general. I'm ecstatic. In that video of Hugo Chavez, Zelaya, Daniel Ortega, it was great. It was a moment I got goosebumps and everything. Hugo Chavez, with his programs for mothers, as when I was very young, I saw that and I was like, damn, that's pretty awesome. Because my mother was, a housewife, but that ain't an easy job. So that always touched my heart.
Word. That's what's up. It's really great to have you on, Comrade Khalil. We got Comrade Kayla with ANTICONQUISTA and Puma Collective and so many other groups. She's involved in everything. How's it going, Kayla?
I'm good. And tonight we get another special appearance from my fluffy white dog.
Oh, Comrade Fluffy. What's good?
They say all Latinos have fluffy white dogs. Well, I think it's stereotype, but I'm good, and I'm excited for the conversation we have tonight. I'm excited to meet the comrades out of Miami. Thanks for having me.
That's what's up, Kayla. Yeah, that's true. A lot of Latinos, they got that fluffy white dog, and then another Chihuahua as like the sidekick that's like barking at the front gate. And last but not least, we got Comrade Libre, Miami. Y'all have seen him on here on the ANTICONQUISTA podcast talking about Puerto Rico and the Young Lords. How's it going out there in Miami, Comrade Libre?
Todo está bien. Everything is good. Currently doing some Troika work out here in Borinquen, actually. So I'm back in the islands building with comrades over here. But same weather, thankfully, and all is well.
That's what's up. Back in the motherland, putting in that work, serving the people. We are Puerto Rico Libre. We know that Puerto Rico is the last link in the independence or quote unquote independence of our peoples. And we always got to be campaigning for Puerto Rican independence. And so before we start, I just want to mention that on April 4th, ANTICONQUISTA is going to be hosting a Diaspora Conference for socialist and communist organizations within the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. What we're hoping to do is to transform ANTICONQUISTA into an umbrella organization, a coalition for all of the different movements in the diaspora across the US, across Canada, across Europe that have been working isolated. We have people from all over Latin America. I myself have been active in the Honduran Solidarity movement for years. And I was always like, yo, why are we working isolated? We all have the same enemy. We all have the same enemy on Wall Street, in the Pentagon, and we need to unify our resources. And so that's what we've been doing with ANTICONQUISTA. Comrades Carlos, Nick, and Victor are going to be spearheading this diaspora conference. So if you want to get involved, we got the email down below, info@anticonquista.com. If you're part of a leftist Latin American group, whether it's your specific nation or just a broader Latin American group, feel free to hit us up, get involved. We're going to be bringing together all of the best revolutionary minds in our diaspora to see how we can come together and have each other's back. Next time the US tries to invade one of our countries, implement sanctions, we can mobilize millions of people across the diaspora to be in solidarity. And so that's what we're trying to do. Hit us up, info@anticonquista.com. If you're interested in joining the Diaspora Conference, Troika Kollective is for sure invited, and a whole bunch of other comrades. Shout out to everybody in the chat who's watching and listening, and also listening to this as a podcast. John Rivera, Orlando, Jenny Lynn, Val, everybody who's on here, Didier Ortiz, some of the OGs who have been following us for a long time. So jumping right into the conversation, I want to get some feedback we can start off with you, Comrade Khalil. Tell us a little bit about Troika Kollective. What's the goal and the political statement of it, and how y'all got started in producing content?
So, Troika Kollective was founded by Comrade Usmani, Comrade Mambi. The original idea behind it was to combat imperialist propaganda in regards to La Troika. The Troika being Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. La Troika being a name that came from John Bolton's policies towards these socialist countries, in which he called them the Troika of evil. The original intent was inspired by, ANTICONQUISTA and Troika Kollective. But that quickly changed. And I think it changed in a positive way. As suggested by Comrade Amalta, as a proposal, he said we should be in the defense of socialism in general, not just in Latin America, because we have a duty to our brothers and sisters and others not only in Latin America, but in Asia, in the DPRK, in China, in Vietnam, not only in Asia, but in Africa, from Capo Verde, economic freedom fighters in South Africa, so forth and so on, just to name a few. And not only that, you know, Comrade Libre also suggested, right? Comrade Libre was like, yo, what about Borinquen and our sovereignty and our fight for freedom that still continues today, with people still being held as prisoners, with Oscar Lopez, one of the most famous ones, only recently being released, right? And not only them, but Haiti, which we all owe a duty to, right? Because without Haiti, Latin America and the Caribbean would not be sovereign in the way that it had found sovereignty. You know, we are Marxist-Leninists. We consider ourselves scientific socialists, not because we'd like to tote our own horn, but because it's a working class politics. It's a collection of lessons. As William Z. Foster states, it's a summation of the lessons learned in combating imperialism and capitalism, right? Of all working peoples, not just the proletariat, but peasants. And, you know, I think what we've considered that makes Troika Collective distinct is we would like to incorporate summations of our own organizing here in South Florida into it as well, which has yet to gain prominence in the way it should, you know, because summation is an easy thing. It's a learning process, especially when you're trying to do it methodologically in order to work with comrades and share these lessons. One thing we do have is a report on capitalism that we're able to accumulate through the mass meetings this summer with the George Floyd uprising, in which we describe as a hot summer, similar to those of 1968 in France, Mexico, and many other countries that are experiencing a lot of resistance.
That's what's up. Yeah, it's really great to hear how you're connecting it internationally, because the class struggle isn't just in one country, it's international, and it's important for us to be uniting with movements around the world to link together as a working class with Black, brown, colonized people at the front leading the charge. And I think it's beautifully put. Comrade Libre, why don't you tell us a little bit about as well your experience with Troika Collective? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but maybe you can get into also how that connects with your work for Puerto Rican liberation.
Yeah, so Comrade Khalil and I have been comrades for a few years now, and like when they talked about Troika, I was like, yo, any opportunity I have to push forth Boricua independence, like I take the opportunity, because oftentimes in the Latin American context, it's usually like overlooked, unfortunately, and it also has to do a lot with our colonial position in proximity to the colonizer, right? Like most nations are separate from the U.S. and the U.S. will invade them. Well, the U.S. invaded us in 1898, and they have been on our land and occupied our land with an illegitimate U.S. government running our country since 1898. And so it provides a particularly interesting dynamic. But also, like I understand that the Boricuas, right, are similar to Palestinians who since 1948 have been fighting against the illegal state of Israel. And the idea is that there's a global project for the emancipation of all oppressed people. And Boricuas are just a reflection of all oppressed people that we are trying to liberate. And I even make the argument in one of our Troika articles, right, that Borinquen is the crux of capitalism. If we can push towards and liberate Borinquen, right, then it is one of the last strongholds that capitalism has, because we understand that capitalism is about economics, and what they're trying to do is they still move, right, goods and capitals through the ocean. That has not changed since colonial times. And so if we can remove ports in the Caribbean, in the Antilles, if we can get a unified Antillean front, which was one of the main pushes towards the original emancipation and sovereignty of Borinquen, right? We were talking with Haiti, we were talking with Dominican Republic, we were talking with these nations in Cuba, right, to form an Antillean confederation to push against capitalism, understanding that even before it got to the point that it is now, that we understand that we right? Even in the name, the colonial name of our archipelago is Puerto Rico, rich port. They only view us by what we can offer empire. And so we have to continually push back. That's why I go out of my way to say I'm in Borinquen. I'm not in Puerto Rico. We are not a rich port. We are a people. We are indigenous people. We are fighting for liberation. Since Ponce de Leon tried to colonize our land, and we've always been in a position of liberation. We will continue to push for the liberation of others, understanding that we are also like it's a solidarity thing, right? You fight capitalism with solidarity, and you fight capitalism with socialism. You don't fight it with black capitalism. You don't fight it with indigenous capitalism. We have to get rid of that, right? We have to understand that our people are being oppressed, and capitalism is the thing that is oppressing us, and we have to destroy imperialism wherever it exists, so that we all, as oppressed people, can move forward and actually do the things that are natural to us. I think communism is a natural thing to our people.
Yeah, well said, Comrade Leavitt. I couldn't have put it better myself. And I'm glad you mentioned the role of the federations. I would love to see an Antillean Federation, Puerto Rico, DR, Cuba, Central American Federation, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and South America as well, you know, Peru and Andean Confederation. Like, imagine if we could link up all of these different movements together and build one united socialist economy, one united infrastructure to help each other out, to trade. And it's cool because if you look back at our histories, our people actually traded with each other. The Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, like there was so much infrastructure that was already built and that was native to our lands. And so we can apply that to the 21st century with the socialist model. But it's really dope to hear you break down the history of Borinquen and its central role in Latin American socialism. Moving a little more toward talking about socialism in Latin America, maybe we can start off with you, Comrade Nick, to tell us a little bit about why you think socialism is the best economic model for our people in Latin America and the Caribbean, and what thoughts you have for people who claim that capitalism is better.
Yeah, I just want to go back and talk a little bit about what Comrade Libre said. He really touched on some things that's exactly what I was like reading right before, a few days before we had this talk. I've been really interested in studying more recently Antianismo, right? And I'm just looking back at the history and how interconnected the Dominicans, the Puerto Ricans, and the Haitians were in fighting off the dictators, the colonialists, and they were all working together, right? You had rebels from the DR fighting alongside Haitian rebels in order to overthrow the dictators and the colonialists, and then you had Haitians going to DR doing the same thing. And this was in the 1800s. And at the same time that this was going on, you had Betances, who was in the DR at the time, also supporting the rebels. And that's amazing to me. My thinking is, what if we did that today, right? And we want to talk about socialism in Latin America. Like I've always said on these streams, one of the main things that we got to do as anti-imperialists is emphasize a strategy of delinking from the imperialist empire, right? Delinking our nations, and mostly it's about delinking the nation's economies, which are being exploited and which is where all the real wealth lies, right? It lies in the nations. It lies the wealth lies in Puerto Rico. It lies in the DR, in Haiti, right? I mean, like we just said, they call it the rich port because they know that they can make a lot of money off of us. Imagine how much money we can make for ourselves if we were to spend that money on our own infrastructure, on our own hospitals and schools. And the same is true for Mexico, Central America, and South America. The reason why I think, we support socialism is because we know that socialism is about building up our people. It's about building up not just our people, but it's about building a future for our people, right? When the socialists have planned economies, those planned economies mean the reason we have planned economies in the first place is because we want to, one, increase the material conditions and the living conditions for our people right now, but also sustain those living conditions and make them even better in the future, right? I mean, there's I also forgot to mention this earlier, but today's also the anniversary of the death of Joseph Stalin, and I think it's so beautiful that it's not only it's Joseph Stalin and it's Hugo Chavez, and two of the most inspirational leaders I think in the world. And what Joseph Stalin managed to do in terms of the Soviet Union was he took a nation which was a semi-feudal nation, which was not industrial or had very little industrialization, and by the end of his life, You know, they were shooting for the moon, literally. They were shooting for space. Imagine if Puerto Rico, imagine if Latin America could do that. What if Latin America could send our own astronauts into space after we've already, you know, improved all the living conditions? We've gotten rid of the cartels. We've gotten rid of all the violence, the femicide, all of the plagues that really come from imperialism. What if we can then, you know, start progressing our people and actually advancing human society for all of our people? That can only be done through socialism, because only socialism will put the people before the profits. And that's what it's all about. You know, that's what we're all fighting for.
Putting people before profits. That's a great way to break down socialism. There's a lot of white academics who try to make everything mad complex. They're like, it's nuanced. It's like, no, socialism is very simple. It's bringing labor back to the laborer, people before profits, not fucking up the world economy, not fucking up the environment, not exploiting Black, brown, indigenous people, women, LGBTQ people. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, Comrade Nick. Comrade Kayla, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you believe socialism is the best system for Latin America, and also maybe share some of your thoughts on socialist experiments and movements in Peru.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, go back and say that, today is the death of two great comrades, Comandante Hugo Chavez and Tovarish Joseph Stalin. And, that's why I'm wearing this Save Donbass shirt today. Not many people, and especially in our parts of the world, know, but the United States is also funding a war of Ukrainian fascists on the eastern separatist state of Donbass. And so this shirt says, Save Donbass children who are starving and sanctioned while the United States arms the fascists in Ukraine to murder their own people. That being said, let's get back into the topic. But, very simply, socialism is the only system that puts people before profits. It is the system that wants to establish a people's democracy, a real proletarian, a dictatorship of the proletariat. What has capitalism done for Latin America in the past several decades, in the past several hundred years? What has capitalism done for Latin America except steal from them, exploit them, kill them? We could talk about Peru especially. Peru is the second most biodiverse country in the world. It is rich in resources, in gold, in silver, in nitrate. It is how much of our food products come from Peru. We have the mountains, we have the coast with rich sea part of the Pacific, we got the Amazon, where you get, vegetables that are also produced here. Sometimes I'll go into the supermarket and I'll see, oh, my grapes are a product of Peru. I just can't do it. Like, I guess no grapes for me, because even though individual choice is not anything backing about that, these grapes, the ones that we get to eat here in the United States, came off the backs of likely an indigenous worker in Peru who was getting paid 4 soles, which is like about $1 for the whole day for doing this work. So socialism, the aim of socialism, is to take what Latin America is such a rich in resources, rich in human labor, just a rich area, rich region of the world, and actually put their needs, put the money back into their hands. The value of their labor goes to them. It doesn't go to the global north. It doesn't go to their own national bourgeoisie, but give it back to the people who do the work. What they say in Peru very often is those who work the land should own it. Those who work should reap the benefits. But instead, what you have today, especially in Peru and in Brazil and all throughout Latin America, is these transnational companies in Germany, in Norway. We always like to talk about how the social democrats are socialists, but really it's imperialism. Or even the United States and England, they reap the fruits off of Latin America, off the backs of Latin American people. And so it's very clear, it's very simple. Socialism is not the best. It's not just the best for Latin America, but it's just the best for the world. It's best for the entire working class. It is the only system that actually puts us in power. Don't forget that. It puts us in power. The state is molded after us and how we make it so, not the few rich. And this is how it is in Latin America. The few rich who, or the criollo elite and the latifundios who kept power since colonization from Spain. It's just trickled down ever since. No, I don't want to curse, but really, fuck that. This belongs to the people whose land it is, and we should own everything, even not just in Latin America, but also in the United States. And so some of the movements that sprung out in Peru, it really breaks my heart, because I think there was so much potential in Peru, it makes me sad when I see, Chile just did the constitutional assembly for the referendum. So now they're going to create a new constitution to overthrow their dictators. We got Arauz in Ecuador. You got Venezuela. You've got all these countries all throughout Latin America really making movements. And I look at Peru and I'm just like, we could have that. We should have that. It kind of feels like a replication of like the early. Sorry, my dog's in the back, but
he agrees.
Where all the other countries, all the other Republicans in Latin America have to go and help Peru, and it makes me feel very sad. But I mean, there's a reason for that. Again, we're the second most biodiverse country in the world. But you had, the MRTA, you had the ELN in Peru, you had the MIR in Peru, fighting for in mostly in Lima. I mean, you got Sendero Luminoso who was fighting in the Andes. But what you have today now is a remnants of earlier Marxist-Leninist parties who are now in a coalition. And the coalition is called Juntos por Peru. And they're running a candidate who is, so the elections are next month in April. And we got Veronica Mendoza, who is the socialist candidate. And, I believe she's second in the polls. So, we'll see. Hopefully things get better. But it just breaks my heart, what the situation is in Peru, especially that we also have a constitution that was written under a neoliberal dictator that was supported by the United States, who ran a death squads against Peruvians and slaughtered thousands and is sitting in prison. It's quite unfortunate, but I mean, that's why we got to support the comrades down there. The, Patria Roja is one of the Marxist-Leninist parties out there. Also, Unidad is another Marxist-Leninist parties to support their efforts. And that's also why we created Pumas Collective, to also educate Peruvians in the diaspora and support Peruvians who are doing the work on the ground, so that we can push our country forward, because we're slacking.
That's what's up, Comrade Kayla. Well said. And I think what's really inspiring about Peruvian socialism historically is the central role of indigenous people, especially indigenous women. I mean, when we're talking about the Communist Party of Peru, Mariátegui, the Tupac Amaru Liberation Front, all these movements that were led by indigenous people had so much women indigenous leadership, I think is very beautiful. And I think because of Peru's geopolitical position as the westernmost country on South America, control of ports, I think the US empire really has its eye on keeping Peru under its boot, the same way that the Spanish conquistadores did as well during the independence movements. Comrade Khalil, I know obviously, your background is from Nicaragua. My family's from Honduras, and Nicaragua is right next door. And Nicaragua has always been an inspiration for me because it's another Central American country that comes from poverty, imperialism, that has managed to lift itself up, fight back against the empire. You're talking about giants like Sandino, like Carlos Fonseca, like Ortega. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what socialism has done to transform Nicaragua and how you think that moving forward that it can continue building?
There's a second that it kind of broke up, but I think I heard enough of the question to respond. I'm happy Nicaragua could be that to you. Anywhere people are fighting, I think they spark the hearts of billions of people around the world. And us as part of the diaspora, that's near and dear to our heart and to our blood, right? As people of African and First Nation descent, right? Because we're all indigenous, right? Like as Emilio Zapata said, the land belongs to those who work it. And as Mariátegui said, the question of indigeneity is those who labor it. I'll say this, Nicaragua is the second revolution in Latin America to succeed in an armed struggle, right? In 1979. And it is also the only revolution to have two revolutions, right? The first one inspired by the guerrilla fighters of Sandino and of Cuba and of Algeria. The FSLN is named after the Front Libération Nationale, the Algerian Liberation Front. So that's his first revolution, right? The most well-known one, the one that the American left supported. The latter is the one in which the American left has abandoned, which is the Bolivarian Revolution, right? Which American leftists have named the pink tide, which is really a red tide. And hopefully, as we see today, as Comrade Kayla was saying, it should be happening, is happening around Latin America, and we would hope for it to happen in Peru. If the Peruvian people can find the motive force, right, using lessons from Juche, the motive force of the people, the will of the people as a conscious element to act and carry out the revolution. So in Nicaragua, they were able to do that twice, which I think is cool. And in doing that, they've had incredible feats of eco-socialism, right? 90% clean energy. One of the only 3 countries in La Troika to have food autonomy. And being at very near the Línea de Ecuador, very near the line to the equator, ecological disasters are bound to happen as imperialism drives ecological destruction. So, you know, they just had a tsunami yesterday. They were hit by 2 hurricanes, level 5 hurricanes this summer, which we did a solidarity drive for, and we've sent donations, and we will continue to send some donations we have gathered. You know, and I would just like to say that the New African People here, the PGRNA, was in complete support of that, of our peoples over there. That's true solidarity. You know, I think they've dealt with these things well. With COVID, they've dealt with it well. And that should show strength as they have a coming election this year. And they've had a golpe de Estado 2 years ago. They had an attempted coup 2 years ago, and he supported. I think Nicaragua has also dealt with very well with the issue of femicide, being considered the safest country in Latin America for women, right? And, you know, I think I myself am all for women's issues, but I do think that feminism here in the U.S. has lost relation to what it means to fight for the struggle of women. Because if the record shows, Marxist, Leninist, communist countries have done more for the emancipation of women than American feminism, and that's just straight up. And we're bordering Honduras, and my heart goes out to Honduras. You know, Central Americans are known for being really strong in solidarity with one another. Our flags represent one another, and you know, El Salvador and Honduras, they have some of the highest femicide rates in Latin America and the world. And that just breaks my heart. You know, with the coup in 2009 in Zelaya, Nicaragua still stands. And I hope it continues to stand. The party has had reforms and things of that sort. You know, if anybody's interested in studying these things, someone who's great is the lead strategist for the Sandinistas, which is Carlos Fonseca Terán, the son of Carlos Fonseca, a brilliant man. I probably do a type up of a presentation we did in Troika a few months ago.
That's what's up, Comrade Khalil. Well said. And it's really cool to hear about all the progress Nicaragua has made. I'm actually going to be out in Nicaragua next week with Comrade Yamir. Shout out to Comrade Yamir. He's probably watching this right now. We're going to be out there in Nicaragua. We're going to be doing some videos, some little documentaries about socialism in Nicaragua, the construction of it, Sandinismo. So look out for that. Shout out to everybody who's watching and listening, by the way, to Itzel, John Rivera. Orlando had a great comment. He said, we need Anticonquista to replace Telemundo. These conversations are crucial for our people. That's exactly the goal, comrade. That's what we're trying to do. And hit us up, yo, if you want to get involved with Anticonquista or the Diaspora Conference, info@anticonquista.com. We're going to replace Telemundo. And that's actually a good segue. Maybe we can turn to you, Comrade Libre. Why don't you share your thoughts on this false dichotomy in the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora in the U.S.? You know, we always hear about the Latinos for Trump and the Gusanos of Miami, but then the other side of that dichotomy is like the liberal Latinos who say we should vote for Hillary and we should be Democrats. What is your critique of both of these wings, the Trump Latino Republicans, but also the liberal Latino Democrats who are overly represented in mainstream media?
I think, like, first of all, shout out to Malcolm X. Yo, he said it best, right? Liberals are like foxes, right? They'll pretend to be on your side and they'll trick you into thinking that they're for you, and they're going to be against you. And liberals are by far the way, right, to socialist movements because they give the impression of change. And I think in a country like Turtle Island, which we call the United States of America, right? I think a lot of people are used to this consumerist mentality of, if it shows up in the news, it's true. I'm not gonna look for other media resources. I'm not gonna fact check, right? If you say that in Cuba, people are oppressed and they're trying to overthrow the Cuban government, people believe it. And the reality is that we have to be principled, and that's why it's so important. Like Comrade Khalil was sharing, right? We're scientific socialists, right? Like, prove it to me, right? Because if you go to Cuba, Cubans are not revolting against the Cuban government. We're actually trying to fight back against movements like San Isidoro, which is a U.S.-backed attempt to overthrow, right, the communist government of Cuba, and we just cannot allow it, right? Like, we have to be a lot more principled in our approach, and we have to understand that if we have access to the knowledge in a country like the U.S., the chances are likely that it is false information to paint a picture that allows the U.S. government to intervene in another country. And as scientific socialists, as Marxist-Leninists, as individuals that are trying to free oppressed people, we need to be creating our own media outlets, right? This is important. Why? Because we have to be able to create propaganda for the people to move them towards education and political education that pushes them towards liberation. Right? If you think about a lot of the media outlets that we get here, that most people have access to in the U.S., they don't force you to think. They don't pose questions that allow for critical thinking, and that's capitalism, right? They don't want you to think. They want you they want to exploit you. They want you to be a commodification, right? Do not question what I say. Do as I say, and everything will be fine. The moment that you push back against me, well, then it's an issue. Why? Because we're trying to overthrow empire, right? And the moment that we are in principled struggle to create an alternative narrative, right? What the U.S. would call like subversive actions. These are like so dangerous, right? If we reflect on organizations like the Young Lords, organizations like the Black Panther, that by definition of the FBI had some of the most dangerous programs to the U.S. government, right? They were feeding people and they were educating people. What is dangerous about that? You have a united front that realizes that they're oppressed. And what the U.S. Government also wants to create is factionalism, right? And this is in documents by the FBI when they were observing organizations, right? I've read many FBI documents specifically about the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords Party because they were made public. Factionalism is something that was pushed by the FBI government so that they could undo these movements through COINTELPRO. And if you're not familiar with COINTELPRO, please look into it. It's only gotten worse, and that is why organizations like ANTICONQUISTA, like Troika Kollective, right? The movements that we're all pushing for are even more important because people in this country don't realize that we have a problem, and we, as scientific socialists, have an obligation to our people to move them towards liberation and also allow them to have the political education necessary to realize that they are oppressed. Because the ultimate issue with neoliberalism and why it's such an enemy is because it gives the idea that we're already free. We're not free. Don't you know? We're not. We're in fight. We're in war. And when I come to my country, I can see that, right? I'm in Borinquen, and the U.S. government is making all the calls. They dictate the policy, right? And so we have to be in principled struggle and understanding through scientific socialism to understand that we are fighting a war, and they have a lot of people tricked into thinking that we're moving forward as a country, right? We have a Black woman vice president. Yo, mass incarceration, right? Identity politics, fuck that shit.
Yep.
We need to be more principled. I don't care if you're a black woman. What I want is a black woman that's a Marxist-Leninist, that is a revolutionary, that is going to be working towards the liberation of her people, not Kamala Harris. She ain't working for nobody. And neither was Obama, who bombed countries. That is representation without actual change, and we cannot fall for that trick. We have to ask the right questions, and we have to observe. No president to date has done anything different. It doesn't matter what color, what race, what class they come from. No president in this country has done anything to change the material conditions towards the liberation and emancipation of oppressed people.
Well said, Comrade Libre. I wish I had another mic so I could drop it, yo. That was powerful stuff, and people are loving it in the chat. Rudy Briones said, Telemundo Univision is literally all that is consumed here by my fellow Latinos. John Rivera, and Rudy said, speaking so much truth. Shout out to John Rivera. It's very true. It's this false dichotomy we're presented with: Republican, Democrat, Coke, Pepsi, good cop, bad cop. It's something that we need to get away from. We need to build socialism led by our people. Comrade Nick, what do you think about the representation of Latinos as being either just Latinos for Trump, Gusanos, or Latinos for Democrats and Hillary, and intersectional imperialism and a seat at the table? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you know, man, I think it's a little unfair to say that capitalism hasn't benefited any Latinos. Go to Miami and you'll find a whole lot who love capitalism and absolutely love to talk about how great it is. But you know, it is kind of scary sometimes. You know, here in Jersey we got a Senator Bob Menendez, right? I don't know if you know too much about Bob Menendez, but he's a Cuban, and he's very much anti-Cuba, very much anti-Castro, very much anti-socialism. But he's a Democrat. He's not like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. He's a liberal, and it's scary because you know you got a lot of these Latinos who go into like, especially like going to higher education, going to academia, and quickly become almost like pipelined into just traditional politics, Republican or Democrat, right? And it's kind of like it's kind of like a social mobility card. It's almost like a social mobility plus assimilation. It's how they get accepted into this society. You know, it's almost like hating yourself, hating your homeland, hating, like allowing for that exploitation is what will get you liked by this white supremacist nation. And that's, you know, that's sad to see because so many people fall into that trap. Yeah, and just a personal story for me. I remember my on my Dominican side, my grandfather, he migrated here long time ago, like in the 80s or 70s. And I remember in 2017, 2018, he called me up and we were talking, and he gets to talking about Donald Trump. And you know, this dude, let me tell you, this dude, he's darker than me, right? He has a thick Spanish accent. English was his second language, and he still didn't even master it. Like, no offense to him, but like all respect, I love my grandfather. But he gets to telling me, he's like, yo, like all these immigrants are coming across the border and they're like taking our jobs and stuff. And I'm like, hold up, dude, hold up. First of all, if they see your ass, you're going to be the first one out of here because they're going to think you're one of those immigrants, bro. Like, I couldn't understand it. Like, he was an immigrant himself, right? And he migrated here, and his whole point was to work so he can actually go back to the DR. And now he's back in the DR and he's living well, whatever. But that was the whole thing. That's what he wanted to do, and that's exactly what other people are trying to do. But it's this psychological attack that capitalism and imperialism has on our people. It's almost like psychological colonization. And we get people who are like Latinos for Trump. I don't think there's that many of them, but they get, but like, you know, what these Republicans do is, oh, we got 10 Latinos who are on our side. Let's put them in front of the camera. Oh, look at this. Look at all these Latinos who we got. And they do the same with black folks, and they do the same with Asian folks. They're like, oh, let's put them in front of the camera. These are our tokens. What we do have a lot, though, is, and what I saw a lot of, is we got a lot of Latinos for Democrats and for liberals. A lot of Latinos who say, oh, you know, I don't think Joe Biden is that bad, but he's at least better for immigration than Donald Trump was. I felt like that was the biggest push, especially in this last election, that we had, that I had personally trouble fighting against. Because, you know, at one point I can understand people are, especially if you come from that background of, you have undocumented parents, or you yourself are undocumented, and you see what Donald Trump is doing, and you're like, oh man, like I can't, like I fear for my life, for my family. But at the same time, Joe Biden is going to be doing the same shit, and he already is doing the same shit Donald Trump is doing. So we got to get our people to understand that, you know, there is no lesser evils for us. You can't choose one or the other and think it's going to be better for us. There's no safe option. The only safe option is socialism. The only safe option is anti-imperialism, because that's what's going to actually address the issues of immigration. Donald Trump and Joe Biden have the same perceptions of immigration, right? They want undocumented immigrants here for their cheap labor, but they don't want too many, or else that's a burden on the system. So they're going to deport some. That's the imperialist capitalist view of immigration. And the Democrats ain't going to solve that. The Republicans ain't going to solve that. No social democratic third party like the Green Party, they're not going to solve that either, to be real. The only people who are going to solve that is us and anti-imperialists and socialists. And you know, the way we could do that best is really, in my opinion, supporting our home countries, right? If we build up that infrastructure, if we build up that welfare support for like the poorest of the poor and back in the motherland, what we'll have is fewer and fewer immigrants. There'll be fewer brain drain. You'll be able to actually progress society back home. You'll actually be able to make significant differences. So, you know, I think that's too part of what we're trying to do here at ANTICONQUISTA, you know, build up that or fundraise so that people back home can actually start building up that progress. So we don't have these issues, and we won't have to rely on Democrats or Republicans to help us. You know, we could help ourselves.
Well said, Nick. I think that's exactly right. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to support our people back home so that we don't even have to be in this shitty US. Like, I was living in New York back in the day, and it was cold. I was like depressed. I was like, damn, what are we doing out here? So that's exactly right. We got to build socialism back home. Moving over to you, Comrade Kayla, maybe you can give us some of your thoughts on the false dichotomy of the Democrats and the Republicans and why we as Latinos have to move beyond that.
Well, I'm gonna just say one thing. You got to stop putting me after Nick, because when he speaks, I'm like, yeah, bro. Like 100% to the T. But I think with and you know, just replicating like his thoughts that the Latinos for Trump, the minority that them, and not to say they don't exist there, of course they exist, but they are the vast minority of the Latino population that actively supports Donald Trump, and they are the same people that have benefited off of capitalism. I'll give a little anecdote. So I have my aunt, and she's married to, you know, they're both from Peru, or, you know, native husband from Chipén, and then, you know, they've lived together. They lived in the United States. They started a business together. They started a business in Orlando. It's done very well. They have several locations now in Tampa and Clearwater. They own a very wealthy house. And what do? They're Latinos for Trump. They're the same. And it kind of blows my mind, because the way that they got their citizenship wasn't 100% okay. But yet they'll be the same ones to be like, but none of that illegals. We don't want illegals up in here. How did you forget what you did in the 80s? Because I don't. Like, I mean, I wasn't there, but like still, like the hypocrisy. But you know, they forget all that because they vote with their class interests, and their class interests are with, you know, their bourgeoisie. So they go with the bourgeoisie. And not to say that Democrats aren't, but they're, you know, they're the very blatant, hard right bourgeoisie. They're all for that, especially, you know, being Latinos in Orlando. Not to say all Latinos in Orlando are reactionary, but you know what I mean. Business owners. But also, now let's go to the other side. Latinos for Biden, or even the liberal Latinos. There's a couple things here. I think that let's first go off in like diaspora, like people who, like me, either lived most of their life in the United States, or if not all of it, have a very shallow understanding of Latinidad. And like, besides their family, they pick things that they want to choose, like, oh, hot Cheetos, and oh, like, I don't know, like just being toxicas, like the Me Too, pero like kind of stuff. It's so shallow, it's so cringy, but it's something that, you know, becomes very replicated. And so what I think our job here and what we do at ANTICONQUISTA is also to explain how the origins of being Latino, the way that Latin America became Latin America, was from the Confederates, William Walker specifically, who invaded Nicaragua, who tried to recolonize Nicaragua and set up a slave state again. The Confederates had the same plan to do so throughout all of the rest of Central America and South America. They had a plan to colonize and enslave it for the United States. And so the Republicans and the newly formed republics saw what was going on in Nicaragua and said, we need to unite because these Yankees are trying to take us over again. And that is how Latin America, the identity of being Latin American, was born. It wasn't born because people like hot peppers and hot Cheetos. It was born to literally get Confederates and the Yankees out of Latin America, of what became Latin America. Originally, it was Hispano-America, but then it became Latin America to get Brazil on board. So I think that is the essence of being a Latin American person, is to understanding imperialism. A Latin American working class and poor person is being an anti-imperialist. And so when you have these shallow understandings of what your identity is, yeah, you're going to fall for liberals who give you Bob Menendez, or they give you Mayorkas as the Department of Homeland Security, and be like, wow, that's me. No, that's not you. That's not you. Your people are home fighting for, against these Bob Menendez, these Marco Rubios, who would like to do this very same thing. They've assimilated into the United States because they're rich, because they created power in this country, and they profit off of the exploitation of Latin America. And the national bourgeoisie in Latin America lets it happen. They're like, oh, yes, come, give me a share of the cut as well. So, our struggles are very interconnected, whether in the United States or you're, in the motherland. It's very connected, the way that capitalism and a class subjugation still works. And then you have another side of the spectrum. You have maybe the immigrants who actually, were born and raised in their countries and come over here. Well, this might sidetrack a little bit, but I've spent some time on the National Endowment for Democracy website. You wouldn't believe how much money the NED spends on organizations in Latin America, on political organizations, on social organizations. One in particular, I got into a fight with, not a fight, but like an argument with another fellow Afro-Peruvian, and some of the ideas that she about socialism, the way that the NED has just spent, and the United States and the national bourgeoisie there has spent so much funding in trying to paint socialism, trying to paint the system that is going to liberate us as the pure evil. Well, I noticed that one of the only social groups in Peru that actually gets CIA funding, because that's what it is, CIA funding, is the only Afro-Peruvian advocacy organization. And the same thing happened in Ecuador. I was looking, what's going on in Ecuador. So that is just to say that you have a lot of people from Latin America who also come here and, aren't going to come into this country and be like, oh, I can't get with the communists. I got to play it safe. This is not my country, or that's how they feel. This is not my country. I got to play it safe. Or maybe they come with their own liberalism, and so they support someone like Joe Biden, who ultimately is doing the same, is literally the reason why they had to leave their country. There's a beautiful poem. I think the last name of the poet is Shire, but it's, nobody leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. And I recommend that people read that, because that is such a beautiful poem, but it's just ultimately so true. Nobody would be leaving Latin America, places of richness, of beautiful, climates and terrain. Who would want to leave Puerto Rico or Puerto Rican rather, if they didn't have to? If we didn't have to, we wouldn't have. And it's because of imperialism and class subjugation.
Well said. Damn, it just keeps getting better and better. Y'all putting in some amazing words, inspirational. People are loving it. Shout out to John Rivera. Shout out to Andres Lopez with the Machetero logo in the chat. Red Lettuce. I think Comrade Carlos, I saw him on the chat. Shout out to Comrade Carlos. Shout out to Mario, Jenny Lynn. Y'all are really killing it. It's been really cool to talk to y'all. Just kind of wrapping up here, because I know we're almost at the hour. Maybe turning to you, Comrade Khalil. What do you think, moving forward, our role as Latino socialists, as communists in the diaspora, what role can we play long-term, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, being in Anticonquista, being in the Troika Collective? What is your vision of building Latin American socialism from the diaspora?
Yeah, super fire. I'm so happy to be here. I'm like, yo, this is dope, It's dope. A lot of people in our generation are liberals and Republicans. Yeah. Just confused. Julius Nyerere said, America is a one-party system like any other country, but it has all the extravagances of an American system. It has two of them. That's on that. But what does it mean to be Latinx in the diaspora and building socialism, right? You know, I, for one, I don't know about anyone else's situation. I was born here. That means I have citizenship that is that of the United States. That means whether they want to get rid of me or not, I'm here to stay. They're going to have to kill me or lock me up to stop me from building a socialist project. And I think we have a duty to fulfill what no other people in Latin America can do, which is to push that dagger into the heart of the beast that is empire. And what does that mean? That means building socialism. Like Giorgio Dimitrov said, it's about building a united front, a worker and peasants party that can combat the rise of monopoly capitalism's most barbaristic political tool, which is finance capital. What else does that mean? That means standing in solidarity with the sovereign rights of the new African people, the Black diaspora that belongs here indigenously, culturally, politically, to lead the revolution here in Turtle Island and all other First Nation peoples. That means resolving the contradiction that is racism in our struggle, because only through the universal, we must find the particular in our universal struggles, abstract it and move it in the concrete to bring us further together. Ho Chi Minh was in France. He was one of the founders of the Communist Party of France. He was in Russia. I don't know if you consider Russians white or not. You know, that racial shit is all a colonial tool. But at the end of the day, are you an oppressor or are you here to fight against the oppressors? The Haitian Revolution taught us, right? With the Polish, with the Italians, all those, they became black. They became black and fought for the liberation of Haiti. And their children bear the same culture, right, in the future, which is today, actually. You know, damn, we just time traveled. Oh, shit. You know, so it means committing to that. Whether you're here or over there, it means committing to the project of socialism, of bringing in a new historical epoch that was introduced by the October Revolution. As Lenin says, right, in his proposal for the Bolshevik Party, that Marxism turned utopian socialism into a science. A science is defined by changing the material conditions, by aiming to make realization out of an idea. If it cannot be realized in the world, there was a problem. It was incorrect. And what the Bolshevik Revolution did, it introduced socialism from a struggle to become something to something that had become and bared its own truths. And Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, Vietnam, China, DPRK, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, South Africa, Zimbabwe, just to name a few, carried that project. A project that didn't start solely with socialism, but the emancipation that was always fought for by Africans who were kidnapped to be enslaved by European who called themselves masters, and indigenous people, originarios, who were raped, pillaged, and murdered, who fought for their freedom and continue to fight, from the Zapatistas to the Nicaraguenses. And sadly, some of those people are matamamas, meaning mother killers, right? That's what we say in Nicaragua when you're Uncle Tom. So even those people are against us because either they chose a class position or they're fooled by someone else's class position.
Beautifully said, Comrade Khalil. Comrade Libre, what about some final thoughts from you about our role in the belly of the beast, in the diaspora, as Latino communists, as revolutionaries? What should we be doing?
Well, what we should be doing involves like theory and action, right? It's political education it is political education as much as it is like putting action behind the words, right? And realizing individuals like Fred Hampton were not killed at 21 because they were just talking. It's because they were doing things, right? And you know, like he said it very eloquently, right? Like, I'm not gonna die, you know, doing anything except fighting for the people. Like, I'm gonna die high off the people. Why? Because if you don't make it a commitment to revolution at a young age, if you're not willing to die, if you're not willing to fight, like Filiberto Ojeras from the Ejército Popular Boricua, right? The macheteros, right? He said, quien lucha se lo merecen, right? If you're willing to fight, you will, like, you deserve freedom. You have to be willing to fight for the thing that we're reaching towards. And I think the important thing here is what is the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora, like, what is our role, right? To what is our role to our people? What is our role to the world, and what is our role to socialism? Me and Comrade Khalil were talking about this, right? And our role, like, for us is, right, looking back on Latin America and the Caribbean, we see reasons to fight. We find that the land that our people come from and the stories that we hear, that we can study, are reasons to understand why we should be fighting against U.S. imperialism, because our ancestors were not for that shit, right? And it is liberalism to say, oh, our ancestors fought just to go out and simply vote. No, they fought to free themselves so that they could have the opportunity to have self-determination. And there is a really big difference, right? We cannot fall into these things that lead us towards pacification. Our obligation as people in the diaspora to the world, right, is to push for international solidarity with Africa, with Asia, with the Caribbean, with all oppressed people across the world, to work toward building a socialist society, not a utopic socialist society, as Comrade Khalil mentioned, right, when Lenin was talking about it, but a scientific socialist society that is not perfect, but it is working towards meeting the needs of the masses. And we cannot get caught up in this idea that, oh, you want socialism, but oh, look at Cuba. Look at Cuba. Yeah, look at Cuba and how few people have COVID. Look at Cuba and their illiteracy rates, because they're pretty damn low. Look at Cuba and how many doctors they're sending to other countries with vaccines that the U.S. refuses to do. Right? And so we look at socialist countries and how they deal with issues and how they address the issues of their people that are brought up. And then we look at capitalist countries and you see a very different reality. And so we have to be principled enough to understand that we have to learn. We cannot critique, right? We have to be in theory and study and then work towards action. And like Pedro Albizu Campos says, it's important to understand, right, that ellos quieren la jaula sin los pájaros. They want the land without the people. They're going to try to displace us. That's what they've done with the Boricua people. That's what they're trying to do with everybody. They will displace you out of your land, force you to go to their country, tell you who you are, take over your country, and then erase your whole history. And that's a person that you can colonize. Now, a person that knows who they are, a person that is in principled struggle, right, for socialism to meet the needs of the masses, that's a person you cannot convince to take your money and sell their country, right? And so I know that we have an obligation to continue our fight, and that we have to work in solidarity in the international proletariat struggle to free all oppressed people in Palestine, in Haiti, who is fighting to overthrow Jovenel Moïse, right? We have to work together and be principled enough to not fall into factionalism.
As Hugo Chavez said himself, and rest in peace, Comandante Hugo Chavez, unidad, unidad, y más unidad. Unity, unity, and more unity. We got to always be uniting, linking up our struggles, because we're all interconnected and we all have the same enemy. That's well said, Comrade Libre. Comrade Nick, any final thoughts from you? And then we'll go to Comrade Kayla.
Just on unity, right?
Or just our role as Latin American and Caribbean communists in the diaspora, our role 5, 10, 15 years out ahead of time, thinking about building socialism from the diaspora, helping our people back home, and what our role is in the belly of the beast.
Yeah. You know, again, like I think a lot of it we've kind of touched on it, and it's been said in the comments. It would be amazing to have ANTICONQUISTA Troika Kollective our own delegates going to Latin America, you know, as representatives of the diaspora, doing journalist work, reporting about what's going on, maybe even like joining some of the movements, aiding the movements, providing funding, providing whatever they need. That would be amazing to have in a few years. You know, I think that's one of the things we're trying to build up to. And in terms of just being a media collective, actually trying to give like a Marxist Leninist approach towards some of these, towards a lot of what's going on. You know, I think I saw someone talk about, you know, you got all these like social democrat and all these progressive and liberal like podcasters, like media personalities who do all this. But what we really need is a Leninist, a communist perspective, right? All these revolutionaries from the past, one of the first things that they started out with was a newspaper, and they handed that newspaper out and they spread the word. And that's how they educated the folks that way. They kept folks updated on what was going on in their communities, right? That's one of the first things the Black Panthers did. And by doing this, it unified the Black community, not just in Oakland, but throughout the whole nation, right? Once those chapters started popping up in city after city, then the whole Black community was united throughout the whole nation, right? And they were actually had a common struggle that they were fighting. That would be amazing if we could do that here in the diaspora. And I think really that's what we're working for, right? That's more about, my opinion, that's like a short-term goal. Long-term goal would be to actually like already have that unification and be like fighting back against every time there's an imperialist action against Latin America. And you know, we start off fighting off against these coups, right? Attacks, like we've seen them try to attack Maduro with drones, with soldiers. Imagine we could fight against that, like take to the streets, fight against that. But imagine we go even further, right? And we start fighting against things that we don't see on the surface level. We start fighting against Promesa. Every time Promesa tries to do something against Puerto Rico, tries to take land, corporations, we're out there in the streets fighting back against it. Every time a workers or a mining corporation kills or massacres dozens of people in Colombia or anywhere in Latin America, we're out there in the streets angry about it, right? Demanding that we shut it down, right? We shut it down. We stop labor. We stop working, everything. That would be amazing if we could do, right? And that's what we're really building towards. I would say the only thing I know this was a whole like a unity podcast. The one thing I can't get behind is all that spicy food that the Chicanos eat, man. Like, bro, I don't know how y'all do that, but I can't.
Word, I tell Ophelia that all the time. I'm like, yo, I can't handle it that much, OD either.
Yeah, for real. I know Kayla mentioned the hot Cheetos, man, but I'm not a fan, bro. I'll be honest. I'm not a fan. One time when I was out there in California, they handed me these spicy ass candies, and I was like, bro, I didn't even know you can make candy spicy, man.
Yo, it's definitely an acquired taste, and living out here in LA, because you know I'm born and raised in New York, and I hadn't tried it until I moved out here, and I was like, oh, okay, I fucks with this. It took me a bit though, but yo, Nick, that's so well said, comrade. And people were shout out to Bone Dance, Nick. You're inspiring me right now. Fuck Promesa, y'all are amazing. We'll wrap up with Comrade Kayla. Any final thoughts from you, Comrade Kayla, about our role in the diaspora as Latinos, as revolutionaries? Part of this, obviously, is the Diaspora Conference we're building up to in April. Hit us up, info@anticonquista.com. But Kayla, just your thoughts on short-term and long-term plan of action.
Yeah, so I know I see a lot of people in the comments repeating this Che Guevara quote, and this was one of the first things I ever saw Anticonquista, long before I even started, getting involved with you guys. There was that video where Che Guevara, at the end, he says he's jealous of the American communists. He says we have the greatest fight of all, to fight the empire within the belly of the beast. And people say that a lot, but I wonder, do we really think about what he means by saying fighting the empire in the belly of the beast? Does it mean just willy-nilly destroy America, or does it mean fight for socialism in the belly of the beast? Because the liberation of Latin America comes in hand with the liberation of the workers in the United States, because our struggles are mutually the same. We're tied to the same thing. We both have the same oppressors. Well, we do here benefit from the imperialism from the global south, but we benefit more with socialism, working together in fraternal and in solidarity in international proletarian struggle, more so than we do with $7.25 an hour. And so what I can say for everyone that is listening is get involved, get organized. You don't have to, some people always say, oh, I can't organize because of XYZ. You don't have to go out and protest in the streets all the time to organize. You don't have to go and, knock on doors all the time. You can sit down and write. You can work for an organization and maybe do their data or update their website. Every little bit of the motions all works together, and every little part is a helping hand into what builds, a movement, builds a workers and international workers movement. And so what we can do here in the diaspora is, one, also get involved in all of our local struggles. Talk to your neighbors, talk to if you're in a union or any people that are trying to unionize, talk to the workers there, go help out at the church, giving out free food. A lot of people are starving these days and they stand in lines. I know in my neighborhood, I see so I live in the Bushwick area, and there's a lot of especially indigenous people from Central America who come around and they go in waiting for free groceries. Talk to them, send them some flyers, get involved with something. That's the best that we can do. In solidarity with our homelands, with our people back home, is to undo the empire that's here. The people that are living under the boot of the empire won their own bourgeoisie and the boot of this empire. Well, we got to do our job, and we got to fight for socialism here. And so,
well said, Comrade Kayla, and shout out to all the comrades. It's been a pleasure speaking with y'all. This is like, those conversations where you get energy coming out of it, because sometimes after a while, after speaking for an hour, you can kind of get tired, but I actually feel more energized speaking with y'all, and it's just really an honor and a pleasure. We got to do more of these. I love speaking with y'all, and we'll try to include as many more comrades as possible. There were a few others who couldn't join, but we're going to try to get everybody on. Again, we spoke about socialism in Latin America, a view from the diaspora with the comrades at Troika Collective. Please make sure to go and follow Troika Collective on social media, on their website. Support them, support their work. Of course, follow us, Anticonquista at Anticonquista. If you want to get involved with what we're talking about today, the Diaspora Conference in April, hit us up, info@anticonquista.com. Troika Collective is invited. Everybody else in the diaspora is invited. We're going to build, unite, and got to keep our eye on the prize. Hopefully someday we can have a union of socialist republics of Latin America, a united socialist Latin America. That's what we're fighting for. Rest in peace, Comandante Hugo Chavez. We love you. We miss you. You are our inspiration. And on that note, we'll go out to hearing some of Chavez's words. Peace out, comrades. It was really a great time speaking with y'all. Have a great weekend.
Avanzan ya banderas de unidad y tú vendrás marchando junto a mí.
Hoy se cumplen 10 años del inicio de una nueva época en América Latina y en el Caribe.
Apostando por una transformación profunda que empezaron en Cuba, Venezuela, ahora en toda Latinoamérica.
Bolívar desde algún lugar del infinito nos está mirando lleno de orgullo. Su sueño se está haciendo realidad.
Esta revolución es un símbolo de victoria, de lucha, de honor, de sacrificio, y tenemos que defenderla.
Y ahora el pueblo que se alza en la lucha con voz de gigante gritando adelante. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será...
Han resistido 20 palos de agua y aquí está el pueblo.
Y la revolución bolivariana, que hoy cumple 10 años, cumplirá también 50 años, porque será el mandato de ustedes.
El mar de pueblo no ha hecho sino crecer.
Es irreversible. Nuestros pueblos han despertado y no darán marcha jamás para atrás.
América Latina hoy se ha liberado del yugo imperialista.
Ilumina el futuro de los pobres, el futuro de la humanidad.
La patria o es una sola y grande o no es.
¡Alerta! ¡Alerta! ¡Alerta que camina! ¡La espada de morir por América!
La conciencia del pueblo, la
Latinoamérica.
Ustedes son el huracán bolivariano.
Esta es una revolución que ni se vende, ni se rinde, jamás.
Al pueblo, lo que es el pueblo. El pueblo, una vez más, tiene razón.